All right, so now that we have the total down here created, let's go and find the total for each quarter. So we're gonna do this a few different ways. So we can, if we were to do the auto sum, we could do the sum and it would automatically sum it. But let's do it a different way. So I'll just delete it. Let's see, delete. And I just want to show you over here. If we go to insert function, you go to insert function right there. And I could, if I wanted to, this is actually really nice. Type a brief description of what you want to do and then click go. Like this is really nice because if you're like, oh, what is this function? I know it has to do with like adding things together, but I can't remember exactly what it's called. I could just type in like adding. No, so let's see. Sum adds all the numbers in a range together. Oh, so this actually didn't find. So find what I was looking for. So let's just type in add. Did that work? Yeah. So when I type in add, here's a list of all the things that it might have to do with. And in there is sum. So I could type in sum. If I click OK, now we get this prompt. And this is really nice. So I can, like, these are the arguments now. And so my number, I could just like add. So for example, in this case, my first number, I could click on quarter one. Second number, I could go and click on quarter two, quarter three. And every time I add a number, it gives me the option, it adds an extra one, an extra line. So I could do it that way. I do not recommend doing that way because that's just brutal. So I'll go and delete everything. And where it says number, all I will do is just go and select the entire range of all of my quarters. All right, you see that? Now it's C6 to F6, and I'm going to push OK. So that's another way to do it. And actually, while we're at this point, I want to show you something that's really cool, and that's going to be called a named range. So another way we could do it as well is that I can add a name to this range. So if I were to go here, I can name, say I named this range here, I could name it Silva. So I could highlight this, and while it's highlighted, I can go over here to the name box. And if I go in here, I can type in the word Silva, and I have to push enter here. And there's a couple things to know about the name box, is that we have to use names that have no spaces. So if you wanted to do a space, instead of a space, you have to use an underscore. All right, but in this case with Silva, I don't. And I'll just push enter. And now if I click on this drop down, it will show me that Silva's there. So if I were to click outside of here, I can go back to my name box and look at this drop down. If I click on Silva and I go and click on it, look what it does. It goes and highlights the range for Silva. Now I could go through and I could name all of the ranges respective to each salesperson, and I'm not going to do that. But I want you to know that this is just something that you can do, and then I'll show you why it can be useful. So I'll just type in the equation here, equals sum. And then instead of having to go and select the data, all I have to do is type in Silva. And as I type it in, do you see how it shows me like this is actually a named or defined range in Excel now? So I can use this in any sort of calculation that I want. So now I can just do the sum of Silva, and it will give me that result. So, and one way I can tell is if I double click, I can see that it's actually adding everything together. So that's just, there's a lot of different ways to go about that. All right, so I'm actually not going to use Silva, and I'll show you why. I'm gonna go and just highlight all of the data. So I'm gonna delete it, and I'm gonna go just back up by here to my auto sum. And okay, well, it's adding Silva anyway. Now what I want to do is I want to copy this down to every salesperson. Now I could do this individually for each person. So I could go here equals, let's see, I could go click on it and then do another auto sum for Maddox. That's going to be really slow if I do that. So the best thing that you can do is just do it once, and then on this little square on the bottom right hand corner, when I hover over it, you can see that the cursor changes to like a plus sign, and that's when you know you've got it selected. Now once you're there, you just click on that, and while you're holding it, you drag all the way down. Whoops, I didn't go all the way. And then it will automatically copy the formulas. And at first, I just was telling you I didn't want to use Silva, and then it automatically added it again. And that's because it just used Silva. So instead, I'm going to come here to the second one where I do not have a named range. And then I'm going to just select all the data. All right. And then I will drag it all the way down. And then I should have, I missed that last one. There we go. Here's the total for all of the salespeople for the whole year. And now let's go find the average. The average I'm not going to spend as much time on. Let's just come here and do average. Now, did anybody notice what just happened here? When I pushed average, look what it's selecting. It's selecting all the quarters, but it's also selecting the total. So that's really not what we want to do. And this is important to see, because if you just push enter, the average is going to be way higher than what it really should be. So let's go back. I'm going to double click in here and change my formula. And I'll go select the center part where my cells are. And I will delete it. I'll just push backspace. And then I'll just go select quarter 1, 2, 3, and 4. And look, it's Silva because we named that range. So let's do this for the next one. And then instead of using the auto sum over here, I will just type it in. So average. And then once I type it, I have to have that first parenthesis. And then I'll go select my 4 quarters. All right, once I have that done, I'll drag it down. And instead of dragging it this time, if I just double click on that box, when my cursor becomes a little plus, if I double click, it will automatically expand that out. All right, so that's the average. Let's go to the highest and the lowest. So the highest, we can go here to our auto sum, and that will show us what function we want to use. That's going to be the max function. And I'm just going to type it in. So equals max. And then I'll select the quarters. And what is it going to be? Well, we named that entire range Silva, so it's going to show up as Silva. Unfortunately, we're going to have to do that again so we can copy down our formulas. All right. So here we go. I'm going to double click, and that will give us all of the maxes, so each quarter. And now let's go look at this. What is it doing? So 243,000. If we come look at Maddox's data, we can see that the third quarter is the highest. So that's where the 243,760, which corresponds to what we have here. And then the lowest is min. So we're going to do min, Silva again. And then we're going to have to do it manually one more time. So I hope that when I named that range Silva, it's not confusing. I just want you to see that you can name a range. If I wanted, I could also just name one cell in the same exact way. If I wanted to, for example, do this cell and name it Maddox lowest, I could just click on this cell, highlight it, and then I come over here to the name box. I delete what's in here. I can do Maddox, and then I'll do an underscore lowest. And then push enter. You always have to push enter. I forget that a lot of times. And then when I go back, it's not named. All right, so now if I were to click on this, again, I can see here that this is named my Maddox lowest. And I could also come here when I'm out of the cell, click on the drop down, and I can see that it's in that list. So if I click on that, it will go and highlight the cell that it refers to. All right, so here's just the basic functions that we're going to use. And now here's the hard one. And it's really not hard, but the commission. This is where we're going to get into if statements. So the salesperson is going to get a commission if their sales goal, if their actual yearly sales is higher than the sales goal, and we have that set here at $500,000. So how do we go and do this? We could just say by each person, all right, Silva's total was $452,000, which is lower than the sales goal. So they get no commission. So I could just type in no commission here, but that's going to be really slow. We don't want to do that because say we had 1 million employees that we were working with, it would take so long to do that. It's not what we want to do. So what we're going to do here is use an if statement. So I'm going to just delete this. And let's go to our PowerPoint here for a minute. All right, I'll come back and we'll talk about our cell references. We'll talk here about the if statements. All right, so an if statement. Now, if we think about the logic, let's just think about this. Basically, if something is true, then I want Excel to do something, this particular thing. But if it's not true, if it's false, I want it to do something else. And this is what the formula looks for us. This is what it looks like. So we have to have equals, and then we have if. The first, we call these arguments. The first argument is the test. So what do we want to test? In the case of our example here, we want to test if the total sales for the year is greater than $500,000. So let me see. We'll just write this down for our example. So we're going to say our test right here is, let's see. I'm going to delete this. All right, let's just do gray, which kind of corresponds to the color of our test. We're going to say is the total greater than 500,000. So that's our test. And we can do this logically just thinking about it. Is the commission greater than $500,000? No, not in this case. What if we move down to the next person? Yes, 675,000 is more than 500,000. So they do get a commission. So these, we could say yes. But then we have to go and calculate it. And we would do that for everybody. So that is our logical test. And the cool thing about the test that you need to be aware of is, let's come back here to our PowerPoint. This test is what we would call like a logical test. It will return true or false. And what does that mean? So if I were to come here and I would just come into the cell, I could say equals. I could click on the total. If I click on it, see it adds the cell reference there. And I could just say, is that greater than 500,000? So I'll go click on the 500,000. And I push enter, what happens? False. So it tells me no, that is not true. If I do this for the next person, let's say equals greater than this, true. So yeah, Maddox's total sales is greater than the commission. And I want you to see that these tests that we're doing, they have to return either true or false. If they don't, when you type into Excel like this, you're doing something wrong and your if statement will not work. So if we come back here, I think in here is some of the things that we can use. We can use less than or greater than. This is not equal to, or we can do equal to. So we have to use one of these logical operators in the test. Is this greater than that? Is this less than that? So we have to do that in here. All right, let's move on to the next step. If it's true, I want it to do something, and that would be, in this case, we want it to calculate. We're going to say we want this to calculate calculate their commission. And then if it's false, we're going to just say, sorry, no commission. All right. So let's go do that. We're going to do that here. Now I'm going to show you how this looks in our if statement. I'll make it bigger so we can just focus on that for a minute. We're going to say equals, and you have to have the equals if. What's our logical test? We did that before. All I have to do, and since I'm already in equation, I don't have to do the equal sign in front of my test now. So I can click on if my total is greater than my sales commission. Then what do I want to do? Well, we need to calculate what the commission rate would be. So the commission is 4% of our total sales. So what we can do here is to calculate it is what we do is we'll just say, we'll click on the total and we're going to multiply it by our commission rate. So that will calculate what our actual commission is. And then when I push comma, you can see that it highlights it. If I delete the comma, see what happens. When I delete the comma, it's showing me, it highlights this, the value if true. And then if I push comma again, see how it highlights value if false? That's really good to see because now I know that I'm in the right spot. It's just one thing I would check out for while you're working in Excel. So what do I do if the value is false? I'm going to just use quotes and say no commission. And you can type anything that you want. It just has to be in quotes, which is telling Excel, hey, I'm going to type in a string of text. Don't do any formula on this. All this is text. So I could, and the reason why I want to say that, I could actually type in G6 multiplied by 02 and see it's not actually going to calculate anything. It's not highlighting it. It's just telling me this is text. I'm going to write exactly in the cell that whatever you write in the quotes. So I'm going to put no commission. And then close my parentheses and push enter. All right, you see that? If I double click, you can see what it's all referring to, and it looks good. Because I'm referring to my total, I'm referring also to my commission and my commission rate. If by some chance, if I were to drag this down and like this was highlighted, I would know that I did something wrong. And you see how I can do that? I can just click and drag and move it around. And that's a really nice way to be able to move those references in a formula. Okay, I'm going to push enter and no commission. And now we're going to do something. Let's copy this down. I'm going to double click and we're going to copy it all the way down to the rest of the salespeople. Whoa, something happened here. Do you see what's going on? Like 0, 0, 0. This is weird. When this happens to you, what I would always recommend is just find a point, say like just arbitrarily a few spaces from the top and double click. And let's go and look at the data that is being referenced now. So the total, that is the right total for that row. Now let's go look at our commission and our commission rate. Well, whoa, what happened here? You see what happened? Now I'm referring to cells that are way down here. Now some of you probably know what's going on and you're like, I know. For those of you who are like, oh no, what's going on? Now we have a problem here. This is what we call a relative reference. So Excel, like when we copied our formula down here, all it did is as we moved our formulas down, it correspondingly moved all of the cells that we're referencing to down the same amount of cells that we moved our formula. That way everything stays aligned for our rows. Like now we know that this total is the total for our right salesperson. But the problem when we run into something like this is that we didn't want the reference to change from our commission goal, and our commission rate. So this is what we're going to call an absolute reference. So we want an absolute reference. So what we're going to do is we'll come back to our original formula, and we have to make some changes here. All right. So we want the G6, we want this value to be able to change as we scroll down. But we don't want this to change, our commission goal or our commission rate. So we have to lock those down. The easiest thing that we can do is we can highlight our reference to that. So I just highlighted 01, and then I can push F4. And look what happens when you push F4. So I pushed it once, and look how it added the dollar signs. That's telling Excel, whatever you do to this equation, do not change the reference to the cell. It's locked. Okay, this is it's called absolute reference. And we also want to do that to our commission rate. So I'm going to highlight the commission rate. I'll push F4, and now that's locked down as an absolute reference. I'm going to push enter. And then let's go down and scroll. So I just did it, and then I double clicked here on my formula to copy it all the way down. Now I'm going to zoom back out a little bit so we can see everything. All right. So now we can see who has commission and who doesn't have commission. Some of you might be wondering, oh no, what's going on here? There's an error. And all that it is because now I just kind of zoomed out. As I zoom in, as it changes, it makes it so that the numbers in here aren't visible. And the only thing that really means is that my columns are too narrow. So if I were to highlight this and double click, so I highlight the entire region and I double click, it will expand the cells out so I can see that data, and now there's no error. Okay, so now we've calculated the commission for each salesperson and also identified which salespeople do not get a commission. I think the last thing that we want to do is we just want to modify our number formatting here to be currency. So I'll just go here, add the decimal, or add the dollar sign, and I'll remove the decimals. See, I did it again. So now we have all of our commissions that we need to pay out. Let's figure out now how much money do we need to pay out to our salespeople in the form of commission. So I'm just typing in some, and I'll go highlight all this data. You can also use AutoSum if that's what you want to do. And now we know that we owe almost $400,000 to our salespeople in commissions. All right. So that's the first step that we're going to go through. And we're going to move on to, let's go look here. I need to come back and we need to talk a little bit about our cell references. And then we're going to move on to tables.